Thank you, Rob. Thank you for the intro.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us here today for this talk that we are calling Sust-AI-nable. And this may be a little bit of a work in progress title. We need to think about it. But we are going to be talking about sustainability in AI. And just for context, and before we start the discussion, I'm going to be referring to AI as any of the stuff that we data professionals do. So I'm going to be using AI as an umbrella term to represent everything around, machine learning, data science, data processing, data visualization. So basically anything that involves the manipulation and processing of data with a view to produce insights and outputs. And how did I come across the inspiration and the research for this talk? So at ForthPoint, we work, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about ForthPoint in the next slide, but we are working on this non-customer, non-marketing space. So think, manufacturing and energy industries. Oh, sorry, this was not supposed to happen. Technology, eh? Oh, and I can't go to the next slide. Okay. Here we go. In this non-customer, non-marketing space, so manufacturing, energy, and a lot of our clients have a big focus on sustainability. So either they have self-imposed or government-imposed, industry-imposed targets, and we work with them to understand how to use artificial intelligence and data science to be more sustainable. So I was doing some research on the applications of AI for sustainability, and I came across this piece of information, which I'm going to share with you later on during this talk, that really shocked me. And if you have read the blurb that comes with the meetup invite, you will know that I had never stopped to think and address and understand the impact that my job has on the environment. So coming across this piece of information really threw me down this rabbit hole that I've been on for the past few weeks and allowed me to do the research that I needed to put this talk together. And one of the things that I really wanted to do is understand a little bit more about the impact that data science has on the environment. I am not an expert in sustainability at all. I'm not trying to be an expert in sustainability, but I had never stopped to consider the impact that my professional life has on the environment. I had thought about the impact that some of my personal actions have on the environment, but my professional actions is not something that I had ever considered. So I came up with a few practical steps that I can take to be more sustainable in my job, which I'm going to be sharing with you guys today as well. And the goal for me with this talk, what I would like for it to happen today, is for us to start this conversation, for me to be able to share with you the research that I have done and the research that is happening around the topic around the world and the practical steps that I came up with. And I would love to hear from you guys on practical steps that you are already taking to be more sustainable in your job or any ideas that come to mind after we've had the discussion and we've had this talk. So before we start, I'm just going to introduce myself. My name is Marta, Portugal. I am from Portugal, but I am based up here in Edinburgh. I'm the director of data science at ForthPoint, and I've been working on data industry. I've been a data scientist for almost 10 years now, since I graduated from my master's in statistics. And I have delivered countless commercial data science projects. And why do I say this? Why do I include this as part of my bio and part of my introduction? It's because when I started to think about the impact that my job could potentially have on the environment, I started trying to quantify all the different lines of code that I have written and ran throughout my career, all the different pipelines that have been created to support the productionization of reporting and models that I have put in place, and how many times I've just tweaked the hyperparameters of a neural network just to see if it was a little bit better. And I was a bit panicked. I can't say otherwise when I started to try to evaluate the impact of every single thing I have done across the last 10 years. About me as well, I love cats and I have 2 of them. And I'm not just saying this because I love talking about my cats, although I do. And if you want to talk about my cats, just let me know. But as I'm saying this because they may make an appearance, they like to jump on my keyboard and just do weird stuff when I'm in meetings. So this may happen, but we are all good, don't worry. And about ForthPoint, we are a data science and data engineering startup based up here in Edinburgh. And we help clients make the most out of their data assets and help deliver on the promise of Industry 4.0. We are quite new as a company, so we've only been trading for 5 months now. But as a collective, we have a lot of experience. We have decades of experience working in data and being data professionals. And a very big part of our focus is AI for sustainability. So as I have already said, we work with our clients to help them see and understand how they can use data science to achieve their sustainability targets, which is kind of what inspired and propelled all of the research that came with this talk. So when you go down a rabbit hole, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to organize your head and organize all of the ideas and pull them all together in a way that makes sense for both yourself and for other people. So when I was thinking about the way that I can put this talk together and organize my ideas, I decided to start with the business question. I consider myself to be a commercial data scientist as opposed to a research data scientist, which means that when I'm addressing my projects and when I'm starting a new project, I always start with the value and with the business question. So I decided to do the same for this presentation. And so when I started thinking about the industry of artificial intelligence, and how that has been used across businesses and what businesses really care about, I came across 3 things. So 3 things came to my mind when I think about the things that businesses care about. The first one is profit. So in theory, companies need to be profitable to stay in business. So there's always has been a very big focus on profitability, reducing costs, increasing revenue, all of that good stuff that we have heard time and time again. The second thing that businesses care about is they like to be seen as being innovative. They like to be seen as doing the cool stuff, whether they use this to attract and retain top talent or to be nimbler and change internal processes. This is something that businesses care about quite a lot and they put quite a lot of effort on. And last but not least, businesses care about doing good for the world. Whether we are talking about understanding vulnerable customers and treating them differently in an appropriate manner for them, or we are talking about sustainability targets or other initiatives that businesses are putting every time more focus on. And for us as data professionals, when we think, or at least for me, when I think about these 3 pillars that businesses care about, it's quite easy for me to see that we've been using artificial intelligence to address all of these at the same time. We can come up with initiatives that help businesses be more sustainable whilst maintaining or sometimes even increasing the level of profitability. And because we are using AI, we are doing cool stuff and we are being innovative. And it's been great. We've been down, great journey and with great success. We've done amazing things across the world using AI. But have we ever stopped to ask ourselves, at what cost? How much does AI cost? And this is the most important question for me. This is the question that all of this research and all of the stuff that I've been looking at over the past few weeks, this is the question that I have changed my perspective on the most. Because a few weeks ago, if you had come to me and you had asked me, how much does AI cost? I would have answered something along the lines of this. I would have talked about the salary of a data scientist or of a data engineer. I would have talked about data processing and data storing costs. I would maybe even go down freelancing and contracting costs and how much does it cost a new line of code. So basically, my answer to how much does AI cost would be wrapped around monetary value and monetary cost. And that would be the thing that I would consider the most, but not anymore. Now, when I ask myself, what is the cost of AI? This is what I think about. And this is the piece of information that I came across a few weeks ago that inspired this entire talk and kind of really opened my eyes about the impact that artificial intelligence and data science and the industry as an industry can have on the environment. And I found this chart. This was an article from Forbes magazine, and this is a study done by the College of Information and Computer Sciences at University of Massachusetts Amherst. And basically what this is telling us, this chart, is that training a single AI model can produce up to 5 times more CO2 than manufacturing and using a car for the lifespan of the vehicle. Now, as I said, I am not a sustainability expert. I am not even the most sustainable person out there, not by any means. And I am not on top of the latest figures and statistics when it comes to sustainability. But if I go through my head, and I think about all the different pieces of news that I have read and listened to throughout the years, I am pretty sure that owning and operating a personal vehicle is one of the worst things that you can do as an individual for the environment. So when I was faced with this information that is basically telling me that training a single AI model can be worse than the worst thing that I thought I could do for the environment, I panicked. I panicked a little bit, and I didn't really know what to do there for a while. And so obviously, after I went past the panic stage, I started digging a little bit deeper and actually read the article to see what this was all about. It was very clear to me that this chart is very dramatic, and it's meant to be very dramatic. This algorithm that this study was based on, it's not a common algorithm. It's not something that we as data professionals use on a day-to-day basis. I think, if I'm not wrong, I think they said it would take over 270,000 hours to train this algorithm. So very complex deep learning. I believe it was an NLP algorithm. So it was a very complex thing, and it's not something that we use every day. But this bears the question, and I think this is the point of this article, and this was the point of this study. How much am I producing? What is my carbon footprint when it comes to AI? Am I producing a little? Am I producing a lot? And the issue is that I don't know. And I do believe that it's part of our responsibility as data professionals to ensure that we understand what is happening and to ensure that we keep talking about this and that we are raising awareness. So after I went past the panic and I realized that this is not a type of algorithm that I would use every day, I started to think about, okay, now I know this is a problem. I know that there is a challenge here, and that is something that I can do. So what can I do to be more sustainable? And this is the question I asked myself. How can data teams be net zero? And there's a reason why I say net zero. It's because if you think about what I've said so far, and if we were to stop this talk right now, one could argue that we should just stop doing data science altogether, that it's bad for the environment, it has a potential impact on the environment that we don't understand, and we have experience, as human race, of doing stuff that we don't really understand the consequences of, and then years later we have to amend our actions and try to take back some of the actions that we have done. But obviously, this is not what I'm saying. I am a data scientist. I'm not against data science. I do think that we can do it smarter. We can do it more efficiently, and we can be more sustainable as we are doing it. And the reason why I say net zero is because there's always tasks that we have to do that we can call them a necessary evil. And it's something that needs to happen for businesses and organizations to continue to work. So if you think about financial services, a bank organization, they need to process transactions and they need to process payments. And this will have an impact on the environment. It will have an energy cost. But can we, as data teams, be more sustainable, create this concept of carbon credits so that we can actually net out some of the activities that are happening on more essential projects? So I came up with 4 practical steps that I would like to share with you of what I think I can do to be more sustainable in my data science practice. The first one is be more efficient. So when I think about when I started working in data science around 10 years ago, we didn't really have cloud computing and GPU-enabled virtual machines readily accessible as we have right now. Right now, it's a click of a button, and I have all the computational power that I could potentially need. But at that time, that wasn't the case. And what I had to do quite often was run algorithms, explore my data just based on whatever PC or desktop I had. And I also tend to code in R. So, and for you guys that work in R, you know that R can be quite memory intensive. So I had to be quite smart about the way that I chose the data that I was going to explore and test my code on and use to train my models. So I relied a lot around sampling techniques to make sure that I had really representative data, that my data was the best that it could be, but it was also small enough in terms of size that I could still test my code. I didn't have to wait for 3 hours for something to run and then just kind of fall through, and that the memory could actually hold. And I do think that we don't do this anymore. At least I don't do this anymore as often as I used to. And I think we should go back to some of these techniques and some of these ways of working, because we will be more efficient and we will use less energy. And when I think about as well, how can I be more efficient in the way that I work? One of the things that I love about being a data scientist and the data science community is the openness that we have. Everything, or a lot of things, are open sourced. There's very smart people in this world that have come up with very good algorithms that they just package up and they release into the world. And it's great. It's great for innovation. It's great for development. But also what has happened is that right now, when we have a question and we are trying to answer a question, we have a number of different algorithms that we can use to try and answer that question. And sometimes it feels a little bit like just throwing stuff onto the wall and seeing what sticks, and trying to get the most accurate model and the best performing model, and not necessarily thinking about the costs and the impact that that may have. So what I would like to do in terms of changing my ways of working to be more efficient, first of all, dedicate a lot more time to the research. So not just researching the algorithms, but researching their applicability to the data that I have, the distribution of my data, all of that good stuff that you should be doing, but sometimes when you are under a deadline, you don't really have as much time to dedicate to. So dedicate more time to the research. Come up with a smaller set of candidate models or algorithms that I want to test out, and set myself a target. So if I'm working towards a business question and I'm working towards value, I can tell myself, if my model is 80% accurate or has a false positive rate of X, it doesn't really matter what the metric is, then the model is good enough. And I set that target and I start testing my models. And when I reach that target, I let go. I don't try to train another algorithm just to see if it is potentially 1% more accurate, if that means that I'm going to kill a whole forest. The second thing, the second step is value adding work. So this is something that I already do. So as I mentioned, I tend to work towards value and start with the business question, but I still think it's something that it's worth mentioning. We have a responsibility to challenge the organizations that we work for and that we work with on the value, the importance, and the impact of the work that is being produced, and question them when we don't think that impact is as big as they think it is. The third one is netting out the impact. So I already kind of mentioned this in the previous couple of slides, but we believe in data science, and we believe in the value that it can bring to organizations and into the world. And we are not saying let's just not do data science or let's do less of the bad stuff. We are also saying let's do a lot more of the good stuff so that we can net out some of the impact that some necessary data science activities have on the environment. And when we talk about doing more of the good, especially if you are working in a consumer-facing business, we don't just have to think about our sustainability initiatives and the applications of AI for sustainability as an externally facing project. We can actually turn our focus internally. We can look at the data that we have around logistics and operations, within the business and become more sustainable as teams and as organizations. We can have a look at how we can reduce paper consumption within our organizations, or how many people are actually reading the all staff emails that we send out, and can we maybe reduce some of the impact that we have and be more sustainable internally by addressing some of these issues. And last but not least, this is the one that I feel like I'm really bad at, and one that I want to work on. That is reduce, reuse, and recycle. So I already talked about reduce. So sampling, reducing the amount of data that we are using, sometimes just for exploration or just for testing code. We know that we spend around 80% of our time as data professionals just looking at data and trying to see what is happening there and preparing that data. So can we do that in a much smaller data set? And the bit that I'm really bad at is the reuse. I tend to just write everything from scratch. Even if I am working on the same data that I was working in a couple of months ago or a year ago, I will go and I will reprocess this data. I will follow sometimes very, very similar pipelines that as the ones that are already in place, but I will start from scratch, and I won't think about how can I be smarter about the ways where I pick my data, and so that I can reuse some of these data pipelines. And if you think about big organizations and big businesses, just try to imagine the number of scripts and data pipelines that are in place to process this exact same data, a lot of times in very similar ways, but just because it feeds into different reports or into different models, or it's being used by different teams, you have all of these scripts and data processing happening at the same time, when maybe just having this single chain of events and you being able to plug into this data processing chain of events at different points in time would be much more sustainable and better for the environment. And when it comes to recycling, even when you're working towards value and you start with the business question at mind, priorities change, you know, and in business strategy, it changes over time as well. So something that had an impact and that used to drive value a few years or even a few months ago, that may not be the case anymore. So we need to be consistently evaluating the outputs that we produce as data teams and how they are being used across of the organization, so that we can ensure that we are being more net zero and more sustainable. Now, when I got to the end of like thinking about these steps that I could take practically to be more sustainable in my day-to-day job, it came to me that I feel there are quite individual and personal goals and personal steps, meaning that I think that I have the responsibility to do this, and I feel we can all take small steps, but I am not waiting for policymakers or for organizations or for the industry to come up with a number of policies so that it can limit or understand the impacts that my job has on the environment. And when I was thinking about this from this perspective, I came across this article, which is very interesting. And if you have the time to go and have a read, it's not a very long article at all, and it's called "Sustainable AI: AI for Sustainability and the Sustainability of AI." And basically, in this article, the author tries to draw a parallelism between sustainable AI development and AI ethics. And a lot has been said about AI ethics, especially in the last few years. We as a community and as an industry, we have had a lot of conversations about ethics. I know at least of someone that is on this call that believes that data professionals should be taking an oath, like the Hippocratic oath that the doctors take, to make sure that what we are doing, we are not doing any harm. We have a lot of power, actually, when you think about the algorithms that we put in place, and when you think about the decisions that sometimes are made based on data and the recommendations that we put forward. So AI ethics is something that I'm very interested about, and the fact that there is at least this one person that also thinks that sustainable AI development falls into AI ethics and falls into the realm of our responsibility as data professionals to address, I found it quite interesting. And when we think about AI, the three waves of AI ethics, So the first one is the possibilities of AI. So what AI might do and robots uprising. So there was a lot of talk here around machines taking over the human race and them being smarter than us and all of those things. So luckily, I feel that we are a bit past that. I think we as data professionals, we understand the reality and the complexity of actually having AI systems in place. So I don't think we are that worried about that one anymore, but maybe that's just me. The second one is the explainability of black box algorithms and the inherent bias that comes with the lack of equal representation in training data. And we've been talking about this, what feels like forever. I have never been able to use a neural network in a project where you have to be able to explain the outcomes and why decisions are being made. We have made some progress on this field, and there are some tools nowadays that for certain conditions and certain types of algorithms, they can kind of explain what is happening, and we have things like Shapley value that help us understand the effect of different variables in the output of the model. And we are a lot more aware as well of bias and representation and inclusivity in the data that we are using to train our algorithms. But even though we've been talking about this for years and years, we still don't really have clear policies and clear guidelines. So Scotland this year, you may have heard, came up with Scotland's AI strategy that is all about AI being trustworthy and ethical and inclusive. So it's kind of trying to address this topic. But my point here, and I think what scares me a little bit, and that's why I think this was such a relevant comparison and parallelism, is that we've been talking about this for many years and change hasn't really happened at the scale that we would potentially want or that we would need actually as an industry. So when we talk about sustainable AI development, which is the third wave of AI ethics, we are not just talking about doing AI for good and doing AI for sustainability. We are actually talking about addressing the sustainability of the entire AI development. So not just training models, but the design, the training, the development, the validation, the retuning, the implementation, and the general use of AI. And we as a community, I don't think we can afford to wait for more studies and for more research to be done on the impact that AI has on the environment. We surely cannot wait for decades like we have been waiting in terms of explainability and bias for policies to be put in place that give us guidance and guidelines on how we should be addressing this topic. I think we have a responsibility to act now, to be more aware, and to take the action into our own hands. Thank you. That was me.